Cool. So thank you all for joining, and thank you all for your patience with some technical difficulties. I didn't really need to say that for the replay, did I? Because the people watching the replay don't know that we had technical difficulties. Anyway, we did, and we see the sort of well, I can use it as a nice example later when we talk a little bit about stress response. So we're going to be looking at functional breathing. Somebody before asked about the mechanics of breathing. Will that be covered? Yes, the mechanics of breathing is going to be covered as part of this. And this is a little picture of me. This is back when I played rugby. I've mentioned before I got cut off that used to be a former professional rugby player. I knew absolutely nothing about breathing then. Wish that I did. It's changed my life. It's changed the way that I coach. It changes what I coach. As a strength and conditioning coach, I focus pretty much exclusively on breathing now as what I feel and believe the most important fundamental movement that the body is going to have to do, but also the impact it has on metabolically on the body, on our physical and mental performance, as well as the effect on the nervous system, and also the psychology that goes into it. So it's fascinating areas beyond just sports. The majority of coaching that I personally do now with athletes is with professional and international, a lot of rugby players, because rugby is my sport, but also some fighting athletes. Tend to do a lot of work with sort of high intensity or contact type of sports. The other side of work that I do is with corporations or corporate clients, where working with either like the leaders or a team of employees to help them with the management of like stress and anxiety within the workplace. So not sport related, but the foundational work that we do and we're going to cover in this session is going to be relevant to both those types of populations and everything in between. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone in this, because we're all breathing, and we can all benefit from improving that baseline. That baseline gives us capacity to deal with challenges, stress, whether that's a physical or a mental one. And hopefully by the end of the session, there'll be some things that are tangibly better for you in terms of your breathing, and what that can lay into other stuff. My relevance of my rugby career is actually what got me into breathing eventually. It was 13 years, or 2013, so 11 years ago. I sustained a traumatic brain injury, I had a seizure on the field, so a fit on the field, and a small bleed on the brain as a result from too many head impacts. That's what caused me to retire from my sport. And it not immediately, because there wasn't a lot known at the time, but as years went on, I came across the oxygen advantage eventually. And the breathing techniques started for me about improving blood flow and oxygen supply to the brain, to help my brain heal. But then led me then into also like what it can do within the physical and mental performance of sports, but then, like I say, potentially within the workplace, or just management of the stresses of life in general. So that's just a little bit of background on me. I'm one of the master instructors with the Oxygen Advantage, so I teach the Oxygen Advantage certification, and I'm one of the mentors also, so I do mentoring of coaches. So if you are a coach as well, there's lots that we can discuss and everything with that as well. But essentially for this session, I'm going to try and give us the most sort of impactful, or what I've found from my experience, most important thing, and things that make the biggest changes for people when we're looking at functional breathing. And a significant component of that is going to be breathing mechanics, but it's not the only thing. We're going to get very practical in this session on the breathing mechanics, and two key areas: above the collarbones and below the collarbones. And I'll break it down. There's nothing particularly exciting about the collarbone, only that it's easy. You can locate your collarbone on your body now. It's easy to locate your collarbone. Your first rib is above your collarbone, just a small amount, but your collarbone is easy to locate. What we're talking about is like everything not related to the rib cage above that. So above the collarbone, talking about our airway, our nose, our tongue, what's going on in around there, because that's where the air is going to travel through before it gets to have an impact from the rib cage and the diaphragm. So that's what's going to be then below the collarbone. So that's why I break it down into those two areas for us. Okay, so we're going to get really practical on those things. But before we do that, there's just one little piece of theory that I want you to understand, because it's probably the most important thing in terms of the biochemistry side of functional breathing. So breathing mechanics is a huge component of functional breathing, but the biochemistry, how your body utilizes oxygen, how it deals with carbon dioxide, is a huge component, and the two will influence each other. There's a third component that isn't necessarily going to come into this session, but that's our psychological relationship with breathing, with stress, with the feeling of air hunger. That's another component, but it's not going to be the most important thing for our session today. But just so I'm giving you a wide picture of appreciation of everything involved within breathing. Okay, so we will practically focus on the mechanical side of things, above the collarbones, below the collarbones. A little bit of theory that we will put into practice when we do some of the exercises is this, and it's often a missing link for people where they don't appreciate how the respiratory rate, so how fast you're breathing, and the size of each breath, just the fancy scientific term is called tidal volume, but basically size of breath or the volume of air in a breath. Those two things multiplied together, they're the two components that control the volume of air that you're breathing in any given moment, or often would be measured in a minute. So a respiratory rate would be measured in a minute. That multiplied, so the speed of your breathing, how many breaths you take in 1 minute, multiplied by the size of each of those breaths, will control the ventilation, so the volume of air you breathe in that minute. So the volume of air that we breathe is really important, not because breathing more air in delivers more oxygen, but because when you breathe more air in, like take a big breath in now, what happens after that big breath? In, a big breath out. And on that big breath out, you offload carbon dioxide. Your inhale doesn't really, by taking a bigger breath in, doesn't really do anything, particularly at rest, it certainly doesn't, in terms of your oxygen levels. Your oxygen levels within your blood, normal levels of oxygen in your blood is 95 to 99%. You're basically almost always full. And the 75% of the oxygen that you breathe in that inhale, you breathe out on that next exhale, along with any more carbon dioxide that the body might be offloading. And the missing link that we tend to have is that people think that they need to breathe bigger or more to deliver more oxygen. And what happens is we end up breathing more air in total, which means we're offloading more carbon dioxide than we need to. And when we offload more carbon dioxide than we need to, technically we would describe that as overbreathing, and that makes us more sensitive or less tolerable of carbon dioxide. Now, hopefully you've come across the notion that carbon dioxide is our, from a biochemistry perspective, in terms of blood gases, the thing that is driving our breathing, the thing that the receptors in your brainstem that control your breathing in the background, because breathing is automatic, that they're sensitive to. We call them chemoreceptors. So there's receptors in the brainstem that are sensitive to changes in carbon dioxide, more so than oxygen, because oxygen doesn't change that much. It can't change that much because it's so important. And you've got something like 25 trillion red blood cells in your body, and 95 to 99% of them are saturated with oxygen. So like you're pretty much almost always full, and you've 25 trillion of them. Like it's a lot. So because oxygen is so important, our brain can't let oxygen go down low before it triggers a response to breathe in. Oxygen levels would alter and fluctuate far too much. No, no, that's not safe. That's not good for the system. Carbon dioxide changes more readily. One big breath, you can offload about a third of the levels of carbon dioxide in your lungs. The levels of carbon dioxide in your lungs is comparable to the level of carbon dioxide in your blood, because you're constantly making and constantly getting rid of it. And the idea is not that we're trying to hold on to it forever, because too much of anything is about balance, and it's about having a good balance. Now, the reason this is important is that in terms of functional breathing, if you're breathing fast, take a really fast breath in, and even if you did it with your mouth, it messes up our mechanics. The faster you breathe, the more challenging it is to mechanically breathe well. Now, the speed and rate of your breathing is often increased during stressful situations, whether that's a physical stress or whether that's a mental stress. It influences the respiratory rate more so. And it can make the mechanics of our breathing less optimal and affect the size of our breath in terms of the volume of air that we can breathe. If it's a physical activity like a sport, if I breathe so fast that I start panting, like what's that breath like? It's like a whole body movement bouncing up and down. The volume of air that I'm breathing is very small, it's very fast, and it's very inefficient. Okay, so in order to functionally breathe well, I need to be able to control the speed of my breathing, and that keeps me in control of my breathing rate. When I'm in control of my breathing rate, I can then mechanically breathe better. So this is why these are two things really important, why I have to do a little bit of a section on this before we get into the practical of the mechanics of breathing. Okay, the final, hopefully, does that make sense? Hopefully the final thing that I'm going to, we're going to just say on this is tidal volume, the size of each breath. We're going to take some larger breaths during our practical element of the mechanics of breathing. Okay, because I'm going to want you to feel those ribs moving, feel the diaphragm moving. So I'm going to ask you to take a big breath. If I'm going to ask you to make this big, I want then you to ensure that you're keeping this very slow so that you're not breathing too much air. Because if you start breathing more air than you need to, we're over breathing, we're offloading more CO2, and I'm doing you a disservice in terms of your biochemistry. Yeah, that carbon dioxide that you're potentially getting out more of plays huge important roles in terms of blood flow. It's vasodilating, and also in terms of, so it helps with blood flow, it's vasodilating, and also really importantly, it's the catalyst that allows oxygen to be released from those 25 trillion red blood cells that are saturated with oxygen. Okay, so we need it in, and we need to be able to control our response of it in terms of what it's going to do to our respiratory rate. Okay, does that make sense to people? I just want to come out of that for a second. Does that make sense? And is anyone going to give me any feedback? We're all right with that in terms of like theory. Just as you're going through that, sometimes it can, depending on where people are, it can feel a bit heavy, but people, okay, yeah. Important that we understand that element of it. Okay, so basically, in all that being said, you want to be able to control the rate of your breathing, the speed of your breathing, because that's going to allow you to breathe better. Okay, in terms of mechanically. And then when we do practice the mechanics, we might do some stuff where it's like take a big breath in, so you can really feel the ribs moving, feel the diaphragm, but I don't want you to be doing it fast. I want you to be actually doing it really, really, really slow. And that way it allows you to feel the movement of the body in terms of the mechanics, but it means that you can still be working in a good level of carbon dioxide within the body. Yeah? Good, okay. Thank you. Now, this is where we're going to start to get a little bit more juicy and we're going to get practical. Okay, so there are some elements where your breathing mechanics will improve how your body moves. I love this quote. Can't breathe, can't move. I think I sort of came up with that as a shortened version of basically what Chapman said in this study in 2016. If breathing is not normalized, no other movement pattern can be. And I shortened that to basically like, if you can't breathe, you can't move. That if you can't breathe, if that thing on the inside of you, the diaphragm is creating stabilization as well as breathing. Breathing itself is a movement pattern. It's the most foundational movement pattern. It's the reason why me as a UKCA accredited strength and conditioning coach, the athletes that I work with, they can do whatever they want in the gym strength-wise and what. I want to work on how they breathe, because I know how they breathe will influence how they physically perform, how they mentally perform, but how they breathe will influence how they stabilize their midline, and how they stabilize the midline will determine how the quality of their other outward extremity movements. Okay, so I'm a big proponent of like tests and retests so that you can tell something is working and something is improving. And what that means is we're going to do a couple of things to see how your body's moving. Yeah, and we'll also do a little bit on some breathing bits as well. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to move to start with. So you're going to stand up, okay, and your breathing can affect, because your rib cage is obviously a huge component. Yeah, like the ribs are down here, go all the way up to here. Like my rib cage is a huge component. I'm basically, if you look at, like, do this on yourself. Find your collarbone, okay, and then work down and find your lowest rib. So my lowest rib, look, comes down to there, okay. And my collarbone, remember the first rib is higher than your collarbone, and like that is my rib cage. And you're like, gosh, it's really massive. Like, I'm basically some arms hanging off of a rib cage with a pelvis and some legs dangling off the bottom. Like, it's such a huge component of us. Yeah. The shoulder blade is on the back of your rib cage. Your rib cage position will affect your shoulder blade, your scapula, which will affect how your arms move and function. So very crudely, this is very crude, these tests, but it just means they're easy for you to do. Very crudely, you're going to stand and you're going to lift your arms up in front of you as high as they go. Just hold them there, see how it feels for them to move there. Then once they're there at the top, you're going to look up and see where they are on the ceiling. Also notice, as you do that, how much do you arch your back as you just lift the arms up? Do you arch the back a lot? Is your shoulder a bit clunky to get up there? And then when it is up there, look up above and just have a reference point of where they are in space relative to your body. Yeah? The other one, sort of the opposite, we're going to come down. You're going to try and touch your toes. Okay? So you're going to come down, legs relatively straight. Where can you touch your shins? Can you touch your actual toes? Maybe your hand can go down onto the floor. Yeah? Legs relatively straight. Where can your hands get to on the floor? Okay? And then the final one, a little rotation. We can do this just standing. Feet hip width apart. Cross your arms over on your chest. Rotate to the left and just get stuck and see where you're stuck. Rotate to the right, get stuck. See where you're stuck. Get a reference point. Maybe check once or twice. Get a reference point. Where can you see? Where could you rotate to? And also, what's blocking it? Is the block coming from the hip? Is it coming from your spine? Where do you feel the block? Okay? Nice. All right. Then, the other thing I want you to do is you're going to breathe in through your nose quite strongly. Notice what your body feels like as you breathe strongly in through your nose, and notice how much airflow can you feel. Does it feel like it's just at the front here, or do you feel air going back? Like, where do you feel airflow? Okay, and then test one nostril compared to the other. How blocked does it feel? Where do you feel the airflow? Do you feel the airflow just going up? Is it just in the front? Do you feel anything going back? Okay. There's some other stuff you're going to notice as we do the breathing exercises in terms of mechanics. Okay, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. You'll feel that as we go. Okay. Now, maybe with your, maybe you can use the chat box for this. Rate your how clear your nose feels out of 10, and how much you can feel the air flowing. Like, is it just to the front, or can you feel it flowing back? Maybe rate that out of 10, how it currently feels. Yeah, use the chat box so you've got that as a reference, or you can just remember it. But interested to see the chat box. Yeah, okay. A few of you put in 5s out of 10, 6 out of 10. It's just an arbitrary number. Yeah, very scientific. Okay. Now, remember what those movements felt like. Because we're going to come back to them once we've done a little bit of work up top. Okay, so I said we've got 2 key areas above the collarbones. Number 1, yeah. If we have restrictions on how the air comes into the body, if we're restricted in the nose, if we're restricted in the airway back here, then you're almost fighting a bit of a losing battle trying to work on your diaphragm and rib cage, because the nervous system is always going to feel stressed if this air coming in and air coming out feels restricted. Like it's a safety thing for the nervous system. It's like, this does not feel good. This doesn't feel safe if I can't get oxygen in and can't get CO2 out, or air in general. Yeah. So really important that we have a nice clear airway. And there's 2 key things that will affect how this air comes in. Okay, well, maybe 3, because one of them is how you think and understand about this process. That's a one you're going to get as part of this session. Okay, the other 2 are structurally how you align your neck will literally affect the space there is back here for the air to flow. Yeah, so the alignment of your neck. Yeah, posture, someone may talk about, like the alignment and the structural setup of what's going on here will affect it. Okay. The other thing and I'm going to help us to do it better. Hopefully, the other thing is going to be this fella. This is the tongue. The tongue and the muscles associated with the tongue. Fascially, the tongue goes all the way down to the diaphragm and all the way through your diaphragm down to your big toe. There are a load of muscles within your sort of jaw, within your chin, within your throat that help to support this airway and help to keep it open. Okay, and the tongue is a great place to start in terms of improving that and optimizing that and training that. Okay, so first things first, understanding this process, then we'll look at alignment, and then we'll look at the tongue position. Okay, and I'm going to give you 2 exercises to do for the tongue, 2 that you may not have done before. Okay, so first thing, understanding. Air, whether it goes up a little bit the nose, fine, but we have these canals that all go backwards because they've got to go back and they've got to go down this passageway here to get to our lungs. Air is not going up like to the brain. Okay, so picture this. This is obviously a side-on profile, and then if I come out of the screen share and I go big on your screen, I'm going to come to you. If I'm on the screen here, I'm going to be like that. I'm like that person. Okay, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're concerned about all this space back here, which is above where the tongue can be in our palate. Okay, has anyone seen me do this thing? Some of you have seen. Anyone want to see it live? Do you want to make me do it? I'll do it. Okay, so if that picture is correct, this thing can go back there, which seems a bit odd, and it will freak some of you out if you haven't seen it before, but stay relaxed. It's me that's doing it. I'm not asking you to do it. Okay, so this can go not up, this way, and back. It goes in there. It's fine. It's sat there. I'm fine. You don't need to freak out. And I'm not special. I don't have some crazy nose that no one else has. We all have that airway. That is just a visual for you to appreciate. If I get this back up, that I put that thing in here. Yeah? It was just sat there. And what I want you to do is realize that that space where I put that thing is directly above the top of your palate. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to get your tongue, and I want you to put your tongue to the top of the palate, and I want you to use the sensitivity in your tongue to really feel, like, rub your tongue all around the top of this palate. It's very easy to do the front bit. I want you to rub the middle, and I want you to rub the back. Can you get the back of your tongue to rub up against here? Right? Wiggle it about, rub it about. Increase the sensitivity of sensation across here. Okay? And then appreciate that that's the side-on view. You've also got the width to your palate. Yeah? So get that tongue and feel how wide all that space between your teeth, the top of your palate. Feel that with your tongue. All right, wiggle it around. Like, feel it. It's like, it's big. You know, if you ever have like an ulcer in your mouth and you're like, oh man, it feels massive. And you look in the mirror and it's this tiny little thing, because your mouth and your tongue is so sensitive. So use that sensitivity to feel the top of the palate. Okay. Now, keep your tongue at the top of the palate. Yeah. And appreciate that the air is going to flow back and down where I shoved that thing. But rather than you shoving this in, I just want you to follow the airflow with the tongue, giving you some feedback and sensation at the top of the palate. Breathe into the face and follow the air and try and sense it as far to the back of the throat as you can. You'll lose it around here somewhere, but breathe in, tongue feeling the roof of the mouth, feeling the top of the palate, and try to sense the air as it's going back, and feel the air flowing. We haven't actually done anything yet other than use your tongue to give you some feedback and some sensation. Okay? For a lot of people, this can help with, if you put your hands on your, like around your lower rib cage, as you breathe in and follow that airflow back, it's like, oh, I start to breathe, I start to expand out here rather than breathing into my upper chest or lifting vertically. Yeah, compared to if I breathe up my nose, it's natural if I breathe up my nose for the rest of my body to come along and ride with it. Okay, which is like not efficient, not effective, a waste of a lot of energy of like lifting the whole of the rib cage up with a global extension power. No, we want to get the ribs moving out. We'll get more detail in this later. Okay, but breathing into the face, a real key one on that. Using the tongue to give yourself some sensory feedback of that palate, and appreciate the top of that palate is the bottom of that airway. Can you feel and sense the air going back more? You know, you rated it out of 10 before how clear your nose felt. We haven't really done anything yet. But for some of you, not all of you, but for some of you, you will be able to feel the air flowing better when you have used your tongue to feel the roof of the mouth and then kept it there, and then actively try to place some of your attention on the air flowing. Like, yeah, I can feel the air back here somewhere. Is anyone like that now? Yeah? Brian has got his video on, I can see him nodding. Yeah? Polly, yes, good. Scott, yes. Look, and appreciate, we haven't even done anything yet. We haven't done anything. We literally haven't done anything. Yeah, but we sort of have. Yeah. Brian asked about Wim Hof. We'll get to that. Let's come to leave some time for Q&A at the end. So there's number one. Now, I said that was just like how you think about it, understanding what's going on back there. Now, it's very easy. It's very easy, which is one thing I love about it. But also, it's easy to not appreciate that, because when you look at someone, you just see this. You see the tip of the iceberg on the outside, and we don't really appreciate what's back there. And what's back there is a big hole that you want to use. It's called your airway. Yeah? Now, other things I mentioned were the alignment of my neck. Literally what I do here, I'm compressing the back here. I'm structurally restricting that space where the air's got to go, that airway. Do you agree with that? Yeah? So what I do with my neck and the rest of my body will also affect my neck. And we're going to get into that when we go and do some more work on the mechanics. But for now, we're going to focus purely on here. that is going to have an effect. Okay? And then the other thing was the tongue, and what the tongue is doing to help support that airway and help create space there for that air to flow. Okay? So, first thing, the tongue stuff is a little bit more sexy, but we're going to start with first things first. Well, we've already done the first thing, but second thing now. Second thing second. Okay? So, alignment. I'm going to try to create length through my spine so that my neck feels here as long as possible. Okay? And then you've got your tongue to the roof of your mouth and you're thinking about breathing into your face. Okay? But then I want to give you a coaching cue that when I first heard this, I didn't actually understand, or I didn't get it, it didn't make sense to me. So if it doesn't make sense to you, don't worry, it didn't to me at first. But we're going to try to appreciate a relationship between the palate, top of the palate where that tongue is, and your throat. And I've done a course together with Eric from Flow Ops, and it was Eric that gave me this coaching cue that I didn't understand at first, but it's absolutely genius for this alignment. And that is, I've got length through my spine, so I'm trying to take the top of my head towards the ceiling to create as much space lengthwise here as possible. Then, and this is where the genius comes in, I'm going to try and create a sensation. You can't actually do this, but try and create a sensation where the top of your palate, where your tongue is, you're going to put your tongue to the top of that palate, and you're going to try and put your palate on top of your throat. So in order to do that, you may slightly tilt the head, so you're slightly looking up, but a sensation where the top of your palate is now on top of your throat. You've got the length through the spine, but you've maybe just brought it back a little bit, and you're thinking, is my palate, where my tongue is, on top of my throat? And with the head nice and long, breathe into the face. And I bet you, for a lot of you, the air flowing back, you can feel it more, and it feels easier. Like the air, it's like there's less restriction. Is anyone feeling that? Give me some, those that got videos on, and or maybe using the chat box. Yeah. Again, it's very simple things though, right? It's not difficult. Good. I'm liking some of these messages in the chat box. Good, 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 good. My burger's gone from a 6 to a 9 already. Okay, right. Now, I like this next stuff. The next stuff is the 2 tongue exercises. Okay, I've messed about with a lot of tongue things, breathing related. Don't be naughty. Breathing related, yeah. And I have sort of locked down to, at the present time, things always change, but locked down to these 2 exercises. Okay, one is more. They're both strengthening the tongue, but one also stretches it. Okay, and we're going to do that one first. So, the first time I came across this type of stuff, I was working with a cranial osteopath, and some stuff to do with my brain injury and whatnot. And he's in Australia, and we're doing a call like this, and he starts opening his mouth and showing me his tongue like this, and I'm like going, "What are you on about?" So if this seems a bit weird, it felt super weird for me at first, but now I'm basically going to be that weird guy that's going to show you my tongue. Okay. So what you're going to try and do is you're going to try and not just put your tongue to the roof of the mouth, you're going to try and suck it, and almost to the point where you flick it off like that. Yeah. Make that type of noise. Now, don't worry if you can't make that noise, because actually we aren't going to make that noise, but it's just for you to notice when it goes off. Okay. The task of this one is you're going to create suction, but as much suction as you can to keep the tongue up there, whilst for about 5 to 10 seconds, you're going to open the mouth as wide as possible so that you're stretching it, and gradually try and widen it and widen it and widen it, but don't let the tongue knock off for about 5 to 10 seconds. That makes sense? You're probably going to feel now also with that good alignment. Yeah, palate on top of throat. I'm leaning forward in to talk to you. You can just do it that good alignment. Okay. So 5 to 10 seconds. You suction the tongue as much as you can. Open it. And then try to stretch the bottom of it, this piece, as much as you can for 5 to 10 seconds. You're going to do that 2 or 3 times. Okay? And like I do this a few times each per day. Okay? And I know when I've been working it hard, because literally I try and do it then, I'm like, oh, my tongue feels tired. Your tongue is a muscle. It can get tight and it can get weak. So if it feels tight underneath or it's hard to get it up there, you're going to benefit a lot from this exercise. If you find that you don't create much strength with your suction, you're going to get a lot from that exercise. A few times in the day, few reps, 5 to 10 seconds. Yeah, nothing, don't have to go crazy with it. Okay? If you find it really easy, maybe your tongue is in a good shape. Yeah. The harder you find something, don't be discouraged, be encouraged, because if you find it hard, you're going to get loads more out of it. Okay. So after you've done that, think about your alignment again. So long through the spine, long neck, head towards the ceiling, palate on top of throat, tongue on the roof of the mouth. Breathe into the face. Follow the airflow back. How easy does the airflow feel? Yeah? Feeling good? Like that thumbs up, Andrew, yeah? Okay, now this next one is harder, okay? This next one, the tongue's going to be in a very similar position, but rather than creating suction, we're going to push it up, okay? I'm going to just bring my little picture on. It's very easy when you try and push the tongue to the roof of the mouth, very easy to get the front of the tongue up. It can be a little bit harder to get the middle up and super hard to get the back up. But I want you to try. It'll be easy to get the front bit up. Everyone can put the tip of their tongue and push it against the top of the palate. We want to get the middle up and the back up, okay? Now, it can feel like at the start, if you find it difficult, you might get the urge to swallow, and you might find it hard to swallow whilst you're doing this exercise, but it's very good to practice being able to swallow comfortably whilst doing some work with your tongue. That's important. And also, as you try to put the back of the tongue up, some of us will, at the start, will actually feel like the tongue's getting in the way of the air, and you'll feel like you can't breathe. You can breathe, and it's about getting this thing up and out of the way, not it back and blocking the airway. Okay, so you just, obviously, if you feel like you can't breathe, just relax and then start again. You should and will be able to, with practice, be able to comfortably swallow whilst doing it, and also breathe comfortably whilst doing it, but it might not feel like that at the start. Okay, now, before you have your first attempt, that was a cut through. Remember, we've got this width. So not only am I pushing the tip of my tongue up, and the middle of my tongue up, and the back of my tongue up, I'm also feeling a spreading with my tongue as it's trying to it's not pushing on the teeth, it's pushing on the palate, but it feels like my teeth are widening apart. Yeah? So my tongue, similar start position as the suction, but rather than sucking for 5 to 10 seconds, now we're going to push up as hard as we can. Okay? What we're going to feel with your hands, have a feel of the muscle underneath your chin and on the outside of your jawline. These muscles are really going to fire up if you're doing it correctly with the tongue. Okay? So with good alignment, yeah, I'm just going to come close to the camera, but with good alignment, same position to start with as the suction. So you can do the suction to start with, and then rather than sucking, you're going to push. As you push, the muscles under your chin, you're going to kick in. Whole of the tongue, middle of the tongue, back of the tongue, and can you feel a spreading almost at the top of that palate? 5 to 10 seconds, then just have a little relax. And then try again. You try that 2 or 3 times. Okay? So start position is the same as if you were to do a suction, and then push instead. Mouth is closed when you do this. Muscles under here, on the outside. Feel it spreading. And it's like, oh, hard. I feel like my whole head feels like it's getting bigger when I do it. Yeah. I'm going to try one more. I'm going to do one. I'm just going to do one with you, Bex, because when I talk, I can't do it. I'm going to do one with you. Hand feel underneath here. Can everyone feel that kicking in underneath the chin? And on the sides here. And then a widening and spreading. And always, as you're pushing for 5 or 10 seconds, ask yourself, is the front bit will be up, but is the middle up? Is the back up? Yeah. And see if you feel comfortable. See if you can swallow. See if you can breathe. Yeah, whilst you're pushing your tongue up as hard as you can, max effort for 5, 10 seconds. Okay? Okay, then relax. Yeah? Now, retest. So, alignment. Long through the spine, so space for the neck. Put the palate on top of the throat. You're going to be slightly looking, tiny bit up. Tongue. Now let's just have a little bit of suction of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Breathe into the face, follow the airflow back. And how easy can you make breathing feel, or is it just automatically feel easy? Almost like effortless, the air coming in. Okay? How does that feel? Give me some feedback. And then maybe check, what do your nostrils feel like? Yeah? There is a nose blocking drill that we also do with the Oxygen Advantage, where we harness the nitric oxide that the nose creates. That's also vasodilating, along with carbon dioxide that's vasodilating, can help to improve it as well. Brian's now a 10 out of 10, so that's another one that we can do as well. Also, we're going to have to go for the to watch the rest of the recording. Yeah, apologies. That's Bilger, nearly no resistance anymore. Nice. Nose feels a lot clearer, Pauline. Cool. Okay. Maybe it's less likely to change your movements, but just out of interest, let's check them as well. The other bit that we're going to do finish with is going to work on that. So we haven't done anything about the rib cage, but just be aware of your neck, palate on top of throat, tongue to roof of the mouth. Relax with the rest of your body. Take the arms up, look above you. Hold on a minute, my arms are further back than they were before. What's going on? Or maybe I'm arching my back less. Okay, come down, maybe try the rotation. Like, I feel like I've rotated another inch there, for example. Yeah, and then to touch your toes. It's a bit of a crude test. Yeah, legs relatively straight like they were before. I can only get my palm down now. We haven't done anything around the actual rib cage, yeah, which is where we're going to go now. Come on, I don't think I've intentionally used those muscles before. So those muscles that work on your tongue are like your airway at the back here is a tube made out of muscles. And those muscles, as we improve the strength of those muscles, help to create structural integrity of literally that airway. So you can train the muscles that make your airway by training with your tongue. Okay, really, really simple little exercises to do, but for a lot of you clicking messaging on there, making an awful lot of difference. Free bendering, can touch the floor easier now. That's so weird. Me too. That's amazing. Yeah. So, look, how has that made your hamstrings release potentially, or you'll be able to touch the floor, you'll be able to go into more flexion? Like, why is that? We've just done some stuff around here. The reality is we don't know. Nervous system. My belief would be, current belief or current understanding would be that airflow is just feeling easier. Your nervous system can just relax a little bit, and then things can move a bit more. I don't think it's anything more complicated than that. I hope it isn't. I hope it I'm sure that his sort of more complicated than that in reality, but that's sort of like what's happening in sort of layman's terms, I believe. Yeah. So, right, now we're going to go downstairs. That's everything above the collarbones. We're going to go below the collarbones. Yeah, and the posture structurally is going to help. I think the main, yeah. Anyway, it's interesting to see. So, we're going to do some stuff down on the floor. I just want to, so you're going to need some space just to be able to lie down. I just want to show you a little bit about, and you can have a little play yourself, a little bit about your rib cage, okay? So, your ribs that we're interested in because of where the diaphragm attaches, this lower portion of the rib cage. So what I'd like you to find on your body, a rib on one side that goes up to your sternum, your breastplate, and then find it on the other side. And the angle those two ribs make with your sternum, your breastplate, that you can see there on me, hopefully, is called the infrasternal angle. When I breathe in, it widens past 90 degrees, and when I breathe out, it closes. At rest, it should be about 90 degrees that makes, yeah, if our rib cage is in good shape. Everyone's a little bit different, but roughly around that. Yeah. When I inhale, it widens. The diaphragm, which attaches on the front underneath here, and then onto the spine at the back, moves down and flattens out as we do so. Yeah. I've got a little picture that I can show you. Yeah. So this is the diaphragm at the bottom of that rib cage. As you inhale, these are the attachments down onto the lumbar spine. It pulls down. As it pulls down, it flattens out. As it flattens, so it's shortening this portion. As it flattens out, the rib cage that's housing it wants to widen. So that's this infrasternal angle widening as we inhale. And then when we exhale, the ribs come back in. The diaphragm moves back up. Yeah. Now, when we do inhale, the diaphragm moving down and flattening out, is it contracting, it's shortening, and it feels like it gets bigger, and that confuses people a lot of the time. But you can say the same about the bicep. Look, bicep relaxed, I shorten, if I tense my bicep, I shorten it, and if I have my hand around it, as it shortens and I squeeze it, like it feels like it gets bigger. If I want to show you my biceps looking big, I squeeze it like this, I don't hold it like this. So it feels like it's getting bigger when it contracts, and it contracts the same way your bicep would. So when it contracts, it moves down, flattens out. The ribs widen in order for that to happen. Okay? For a lot of the time for people, the sensation of the diaphragm contracting is it's deep inside, and it's a little bit more difficult to feel compared to tensing your bicep. If I ask you to tense your bicep, now everyone tense their bicep, show me the gun, show that, squeeze it. You've done that before, you know what it feels like, and you can squeeze it. And in order for you to really feel it, you shorten it, and then you squeeze it again to really feel it. Yeah? Have it on length and try and squeeze it. It's not quite, it's harder to feel. That makes sense? You feel more contraction when you shorten it. So, if I want to contract and feel my diaphragm more strongly, I want to shorten it, and then I want to squeeze it. How do I do that? Well, it shortens, it contracts on an inhale. So if I breathe in, maybe I feel it, but now if I squeeze it, once I've inhaled, I'm going to really feel it, isometrically contracting. How do I squeeze my diaphragm? Not with your hands, but in terms of contracting it, is I try to breathe in, but I hold my breath. So I breathe in, which it's like, breathing in is like there, and then the squeeze, like, is then holding the breath and trying to breathe in again. So what happens? I breathe in, hold my breath, now I try to breathe in. You see that? It like goes boom. That's me going like, So you breathe in, you shorten it, it contracts, and then when you hold your breath and try and breathe in again, no air can come in because you're holding your breath, but the diaphragm is then going to have another like pulse. Can we feel that? Yeah. Now, if you're sat up or stood up in any sort of way, your diaphragm is doing some work to posturally stabilize yourself. We're going to get down on the floor in a second after showing you this next little picture so that you can feel the diaphragm without that relationship, okay? So this is a slice through the body. Here is the diaphragm, okay? Slightly bigger on the right-hand side compared to the left. Attachments down onto the lumbar spine. Look at all these tissues that come into it and attach fascially into it and into the same places where the diaphragm is connecting onto the spine. The diaphragm influences the spine, for sure. It's connected to it. The diaphragm influences the rib cage. It's connected to it, and vice versa. But other big tissues like psoas major come in, psoas minor come in, our hip flexors come in, connect into the spine, and fascially connect into the diaphragm. Quadratus lumborum, QL, connecting in. Transverse abdominis, connecting into the diaphragm. These tissues are all related to each other, and the rib cage and where you put that rib cage will influence where these tissues are, and these tissues will influence each other. Yeah. So appreciating this whilst we go into the final section for today's session will hopefully make sense as to why things can improve as we go. We've got pelvic floor down here as well, which was often described as another diaphragm, and our alignment and stacking, a bit like structurally for the neck, our alignment and stacking of the rib cage and the pelvis will dictate how well the diaphragm and pelvic floor work together and how well we can create intra-abdominal pressure in this area, which helps stabilize the spine, helps with midline stability, helps with force transfer. And we're going to feel those things now as we go. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to come down onto the floor. I've got my little thingy-majiggy here, little mat. We're going to be on the floor. You're going to be lying completely flat, okay? And try to lift this up so you can see, lying completely flat, not trying to do anything. You're now at the mercy of just the floor and gravity. Hopefully you're connected to the floor if gravity's working on you. And you don't have to hold any tension to keep yourself upright, because now you're lying down on the floor, okay? Couple of important points of reference. Your head and your neck, just being aware of where they are on the floor and if they move later. Your rib cage on the floor and your ribs at the front. How much are your ribs at the front sticking up? How much is your back arch at the back? Okay. Then fingers on like your pelvis position. How is your pelvis sat? And how is it going to change when I give you something to do? Yeah, they're reference points. The pelvis, the ribs at the front, the back at the back, or the ribs at the back, and then your neck and head. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to move our rib cage with a reference point of the sternum. So maybe locate your sternum. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my sternum up towards the ceiling, which is basically projecting my rib cage forward. So if I push my rib cage up, I feel my back arch. If I have my hands on my pelvis and I lift that sternum up, I feel my pelvis roll forwards. So anterior tilt, it dumps forwards, it rolls forward. My lower back arches, my whole rib cage is pushed up, big arch in the back, and maybe I felt my neck slide a bit down as well. So I've lost length through the whole of my spine. If I do the opposite, I pull the sternum down. If I really pull the sternum down as hard as I can, I almost want to do a sit-up. So I pull the sternum down, I feel my head sliding, my neck tilting back, compressing the back of my neck. I can feel my pelvis tuck underneath, and I feel my back flatten. Yeah, this is compromise, and this is compromise, and we want to find a happy medium. Yeah, you can stay down there, but if I show you that, just if I kneel for a second, just like we had with the neck, if I'm in a poor position with my neck, I'm creating like resistance, structurally providing some poor positioning for the air to actually move in that space. I'm restricting the position, yeah. Whereas, we just felt there when you move the rib cage, the neck moves with it. And
if I move the rib cage forward, I'm pushing the rib cage up, I'm potentially tilting it back, but I'm out of alignment with my pelvis. My neck will compensate as well, but my diaphragm that is attached underneath here is, rather than now working like I'm looking downwards, now it's actually looking a little bit out there. Yeah? And when I do push that forwards and that pelvis tilts forward as well, so my pelvis is out here or back there, and this is forward here. So I've not got a connection, a relationship where the rib cage is connected to the pelvis. I want that. That needs to be connected so that diaphragm pelvic floor can work and communicate to each other. Okay. The other compensation would be like being flexed and compressed down here. The diaphragm is moving in this space between your rib cage and your pelvis. If I'm compressed here, with my poor posture, my neck, I then compensate and compromise here again, but also down here, I've not got space for the diaphragm to move. I've also got a lot of weight of my body on my rib cage for that rib cage and diaphragm to be able to move. Okay, so we want to find a nice neutral position so we've got space for the rib cage and diaphragm to move, and then also alignment structurally so that the diaphragm and pelvic floor can work together. Okay, so what does that look like? So that looks like taking my knees and bending them and putting my feet flat to start with. If I just do that, a lot of the time you'll feel your pelvis is in a slightly more neutral position, your ribs will come down a little bit, your back will feel a little bit flatter, and you're like, oh gosh, even just that feels better than my legs being completely out straight. Okay? Now, next step would be, can you create some space between your rib cage and your pelvis? So I like to sort of walk, keep my pelvis still and walk my rib cage, like wiggle it back. So I feel like I've created space between here and here. Yeah, between your rib cage and your pelvis. Got a nice bit of space for the diaphragm to be able to move. Okay, and then long through the spine, take my head towards the wall behind me, and I'm going to try and put that palate on top of my throat. So I've got a little tilt backwards, tongue to the roof of the mouth, and then my final bit is I'm going to do a very, very gentle pelvic tuck, a tiny, probably won't even be able to see it on the camera, a tiny tuck of the pelvis where I push through my feet ever so slightly, and then I'm able to pull the rib cage down towards the floor, which just flattens slightly so those ribs meet the pelvis. I've got space here, not compromising space, but the ribs are now just meeting the pelvis, and when I do that, you're going to feel the posterior ribs, the ribs at the back, sort of pressing in or gently connected to the floor behind you. So you should feel a sensation of pressure on the floor against your back when you've got those tiny pelvic tuck and those ribs meeting the pelvis, gently, ever so slightly pushing through your feet. Okay, with the alignment through the neck, tongue to the roof of the mouth, breathe into the face. Have your hands on the palms on the outside of the ribs, fingertips somewhere meeting in the middle, not on your belly button, above your belly button, between your belly button and your sternum. Okay? With the rib cage connected to the pelvis, rib cage connected to the floor, length through that spine, breathe into the face, and you'll feel the ribs widen, you'll feel the belly get big as well as it moves up towards the ceiling, but you feel a widening of the ribs, and you should even be able to feel air going into the back. And then very slowly control the exhalation. Okay, now compare that to be completely relaxed, let your legs go straight, so completely relaxed, legs straight, don't just re-juggle yourself, so you're like back to the start. Don't do anything with your alignment, don't do anything with your airway or anything that we've done, but just completely lie there and put your hands on your stomach region where they were before, and just take a breath in and out through the nose. And what you'll feel is, you'll feel 9 times out of 10, when the diaphragm doesn't have to stabilize the midline, someone will breathe down here rather than their upper chest. But I bet what's happening now when you're just lying flat and straight, completely relaxed, is your belly is moving up towards the ceiling, and it's a one-dimensional breath. The difference is when we get things stacked and aligned is there's not just movement here, we get the rib cage to move, we create intra-abdominal pressure that gets a three-dimensional expansion. And in order to do that, we need space for the diaphragm and the rib cage, and we need that alignment from the rib cage and the pelvis stacked together. So go back so you can practice the setup. Knees bent, feet flat. Notice how that just neutralizes things. Create space between your rib cage and your pelvis, so walk that rib cage back, lift it up and walk it back. Neck nice and long towards the wall behind you. Palate on top of throat, so the head tilts back slightly. Tongue to the roof of the mouth, and then a tiny little pelvic tuck. Ribs come to meet the pelvis, so you feel the rib cage connected to the floor. You breathe very quietly in through the nose. Feel the ribs widen. Feel the belly get big, but it's not just the belly moving now. The ribs are moving to the sides, out laterally. And if you keep the rib cage connected to the pelvis and the rib cage connected to the floor, you should be able to feel some space moving into the back. And you feel your back filling up against the floor. And then very slowly out of the nose. So this is in and out through the nose, very, very slowly. Okay? And then what we're going to do is, we're going to take some bigger breaths, but very, 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 very slow. I want you to maybe do 2 or 3, but we're going to try and take as big a breath as we can. Filling from the bottom up, just as we've done. Really feel the mechanics getting big, but how slowly can you do it? Yeah, try and give people the cue of try and get all of the air in the room inside of your lungs, but as slowly as possible. Okay, so I'll sort of demonstrate. You can join me in this first one. It's going to be super duper duper slow. Yeah, so check that you've got space between the rib cage and the pelvis. Check you've got that gentle little tuck and the ribs meeting the pelvis, so we're nicely stacked and aligned. Rib cage is connected to the floor. Palate is on top of throat. Tongue is to the roof of the mouth. You breathe in very slowly. Feel your fingers moving because of your diaphragm. Feel the ribs getting wider against your hands. Feel air going into the back. It's very slow. I'm still inhaling. Trying to get all of the air in the room in your lungs. Filling from the bottom up. Once you don't feel like you can get any more air in, slowly on the exhale. How slow can you make that exhale? You may even feel a little bit of air hunger if you really slow it down. Stay relaxed with it, then take a second breath, as slow as you can, but as big as you can. Rib cage expanding three-dimensionally. Diaphragm being the thing that's driving muscularly the air in. Slowly on the exhale, slowly exhale down as much as you can, without forcing it or making it stressful. And take one more like that. Feel the back get big, feel the ribs get big and wide. Feel the diaphragm getting big. Slow on the exhale. Okay, and then let's retest a few things. Okay, so you can retest what's your hamstrings feel like. So my palm is now flat on the floor where it wasn't at the start. What's your shoulders, overhead feel like? That feels nicer to move them. I'm arching less through my back to make it happen, and they're further back on the ceiling when I compare. And then my rotation feels an awful lot freer,
particularly on this left side, for me personally. Yeah. Now, that's all of the practical I wanted to go through. Apologies in terms of time because we had all of those technical difficulties at the start. Thank you for so many of you staying on all the way to the end. I wanted to give a little bit of context and also give some time to us to answer any questions people have got. And let us know in the comments now, some of you are already doing it, like rotation much better, like what things, what improvements have you seen or felt? And in terms of your breathing and your airway, of like how effortless it feels or how clear it feels, how easy it feels, and can we appreciate that if the one thing your nervous system's got to do to keep you alive, it's got to do a gazillion different things, but the oxygen in and the managing of CO2, it's got to breathe. If here is coming in easier and here is working more efficiently, so breathing is calmer, the nervous system feels safer, like that we can feel that and we can see how that has some like really, long-term and beneficial effects of literally everything. It doesn't matter whether you're an international rugby player working with me or whether you're whatever, like it just doesn't matter what the thing is, like that's going to be helpful for whether you're interested in sports, whether you're interested in not sports or life or stress or whatever it is that you're interested in, that as a baseline is going to help. Haley nose feels much clearer. So some breath, like it's not a session for this, but breath holding work also really helps to clear, decongest the nose as well. Kieran feeling breath in the back of the throat now as well. Cool. Yeah, really nice. Now, one little bit of context for the breathing mechanics in terms of like functional breathing, like movement, is that practicing down on the floor is where we start because it's easiest. One reason is you can feel the floor gives you feedback of where straight and where alignment is. It's not that we're trying to be perfectly straight, but it gives you some external feedback on your back. But you're supported, so you don't have to stabilize your midline, so your diaphragm can just work on breathing. But gradually what we want to be able to do is we want to get to being able to breathe well, take that and take it into more normal vertical positions gradually, progressively and systematically. So I could take myself, if I came up against here, I could create the same position. I could go, I could pull the curtain down, don't tell anyone that happened. Right, so I could go into like a half a squat, which is the same bent knee position I was on the floor, and then have my back, little pelvic tilt, long through the spine, space between the ribcage and pelvis, head and neck in position. I've got all that feedback from the wall now, or from the door, just like I had on the floor, but I'm now vertical, working against gravity, and having to do some part of like stabilizing, but I'm still supported. And my quads are working, like metabolically, I'm having to do something. Yeah, that's a nice little stepping stone towards being upright and being able to breathe well and stabilize at the same time, but it's not as hard as running and changing direction or something like that. So we can build up things gradually and progressively. That's just a little bit of context on that. We felt the effect it had on the kinetic chain. One thing I wanted to let you know about and then answer any questions was obviously at probreathwork.com is my website. There's 2 free courses on there. Free Foundations of Breathing course takes you through all of the foundational work of the biochemistry, the biomechanics in more detail. And well, I've tried to give you as much detail here as possible as I can, but there's a whole free course there with and you'll get the replay of this session as well. And the foundation work that's within that, for most people, like they don't need any more than that. And I want to make that available for people, and hence why it's completely free. And then there's also a free course specific for stress and anxiety on probreathwork.com. So you can check those out. That's my Instagram, which most of you have probably come across to get here. And then the final thing was the Oxyvented certification. I'm running 2 next one is online. is on the 2nd of April, over 8 weeks. One of you that's on the call has just recently signed up. The early bird offer for that ended, to save 50 quid, ended last night. As a sort of a thank you for joining the webinar, I've just kept that open for you with this particular code. So you will still, if you want to sign up for the online certification with the Oxygen Advantage with me, coaching you, teaching you, and ongoing mentoring sessions that I do via Zoom for anybody that has done the certification with me. That's all part of the price that you pay. There's no like ongoing fee for all the monthly mentoring sessions. But with the code webinar50, you get the 50. You basically get the early bird still off the certification online. The other certification that I'm doing is in Scotland, 17th and 19th of May. That's at a beautiful retreat centre just north of Glasgow, where the accommodation, the retreat facilities, so sauna, ice bath, jacuzzi, all that stuff is included. Your food is included, accommodation, everything as part of the training and certification. So you get your certification and you have an amazing retreat experience. With or without me, you can sort of ignore me in the evening if you want to, or you can or we can do retreat things, whatever that may be. Yeah, that's 17th to 19th of May in Scotland. And then later this year, in November, going to Sydney, Australia. So anyone that's out on the other side of the world. And then after Sydney, going over to New Zealand for like the end of November, start of December. Dates that to be confirmed. We're going to run a certification in Sydney, 15th, 17th of November with Dean Gladstone. Details are on the website for that as well. But then there will be one also in Auckland in New Zealand. Cool. So, any questions? Gainer's got a question. Gainer's coming to the Tenerife retreat next week, or this week coming. Yeah, Thursday, whatever, on Monday. Yeah, Thursday. In 3 days, going to see you. Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, 3 days. Do you need to bring a yoga mat? You don't have to, but you can do if you'd like to, depending on what your luggage allocation is like, probably. If you can fit in your luggage, then yes, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Gavin, will you be doing another online course this year? No, I won't be doing. This is the only online one that I'm going to be doing this year. Gavin, apologies. Cool, Simon. Thank you for joining. If I've covered everything, I'm just going to answer questions. So if people need to jump off, jump off. If you have any questions,
quick one.
Yeah, you can unmute. You can unmute yourself.
Sorry, yeah. So yeah, I've been doing a little bit of Wim Hof for the past 12 months, etc. But
yes,
I've noticed, like when I'm running and stuff like that, like when I'm breathing deep into the diaphragm, I can feel it. I don't know what it is, to be honest, but I can feel as if the air is kind of traveling down into the hips or arms and stuff like that. Obviously, it may not be air, but have you any experience with that, or what it might be, or like it doesn't feel bad or anything like that?
Yeah, you might. So you may be feeling. Do you mean and you're saying when you're running, you can feel?
So like if I'm running and I'm pushing into the diaphragm, it's as if I'm breathing into my hips essentially, or into my legs, type of thing. Or if I'm just sitting, it'd be like I'm breathing into the full body as a full breath type of thing.
Yeah, so there's some. So there's a couple of things. Some bits might be that we don't fully understand, but there are some bits that we do understand that. In terms of down towards the hips, so your diaphragm and pelvic floor will be working together, so you can definitely feel some stuff going down into the hips from the pelvic floor. But you're also creating pressure in that whole area, and your internal organs are moving. So there is some physical movement that's going on there. That yes, we can feel sensations moving into the hips for sure. When we bring our awareness to different body parts, they've done some research to show that like you can improve blood flow to those areas. So sensations of that you may feel in some extremities can be improving in blood flow. When you improve your relationship with carbon dioxide, we definitely get a vasodilating effect, which means that you're going to improve blood flow to to everywhere, which would include the extremities. You would get the opposite with the Wim Hof breathing, where you're hyperventilating, you're offloading carbon dioxide, so you get vasoconstriction and you get some of the tingling and stuff. That's like
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
vasoconstriction that we're feeling.
Not necessarily during the Wim Hof. It's just
Yeah,
kind of the Wim Hof kind of led me to free up some kind of blockages, and
yeah,
then I started to kind of feel that side of things. But yeah,
yeah.
it's probably
And you've got your whole lymph system linked in there as well.
yeah.
Like there's for sure stuff moving. Um,
Yeah, thank you. Really good, really good, really enjoyable by the way as
Thank
well.
you. I'm glad.
Yeah,
Glad you. Well,
yeah,
thank you for joining.
yeah. Uh,
And just
um,
need to see if there's any other
hopefully see you
questions.
all again.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. All right. Thanks a lot again.
Take
Bye bye.
care. Uh, Anthony.
Jacko, I got one question which
Yeah.
came from one of my clients.
Yeah.
She's got hypermobility, and I said I'd ask you about
Yeah.
it because I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah.
If somebody is hypermobile and so her physiotherapist said do belly breathing, but hasn't taught her to do belly breathing. She's created a lot of intra-abdominal pressure. She's got pelvic organ prolapses already.
Right.
And when we were doing some breathing exercises, she said to me, what is the consequence of doing diaphragmatic breathing when you're hypermobile? So it really got me thinking, does the diaphragm contract so far down that it creates too much intra-abdominal pressure on somebody with hypermobility?
I don't know if we have anything. I can have a quick search later. I don't know if we have anything specific around the effect of breathing on hypermobility. Sometimes hypermobility for people will affect all joints. Sometimes it's not. Um, the diaphragm typically only moves about 2 or 3 centimeters, like the total movement downwards of it. So it's not like it's going to be going down and causing sort of problems down there. The females have what we call a zone, like a smaller zone of apposition. So the movement that the diaphragm goes through is a little bit smaller because the rib cage is a little bit wider and flatter. Her ribs maybe can like move and articulate more if she has hypermobility within, if it includes those joints. But I haven't, doesn't mean that this isn't the case. I haven't come across anything to suggest that diaphragmatic breathing could have a negative impact on hypermobility. I think what's important is that somebody teaching them understands the whole component of what diaphragmatic functional breathing is, which does involve the rib cage, does involve all the alignment stuff we just talked about, and importantly, the stuff I said at the beginning that around the volume of air that someone's breathing. That all has a massive impact. It's probably like the and then their psychological relationship with the sensation of air hunger, which is going to be linked to their CO2, which is linked to that volume of air that they're breathing. So from what you've described just like a small little piece there, but from my concern, is that the right word? Let's use it. My concern with that example is that is someone being taught correctly, or are they just being told to push their stomach out? And if they're hypermobile, maybe they can push their stomach out loads, but they're just not being taught. They're not being taught correctly. But equally, I haven't done a heap of work with hypermobile people. I have, worked with a couple, and I've never come across it being a problem in terms of teaching diaphragmatic breathing. I think the question is potentially a little bit wider of like whether someone's hypermobile or not. Are they being taught correct functional breathing, or are they being taught to just stick the belly out?
Yeah, good point.
That would be my sort of train of thought on it. But equally, I would also just have a quick search of Google Scholar of just the words like diaphragmatic breathing and hypermobility. Just search those things, and you'll see if anything comes up. But I would suspect that that's not something that's been particularly studied.
Lovely. Thank you. Brilliant session tonight. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cool. Hopefully it's even better in person in Tenerife. Alan asked a question, if he's still on the call, can demonstrate the first tongue exercise. So that was the suction one. I don't know if he's pulling my leg and just wants me to open my mouth in front of the camera again, but I'll do it. And Alan, if you are pulling my leg, well done, you've got it. I'm going to have my mouth wide open, not like too crazy wide to start with, and I'm going to suction my tongue to the roof of the mouth. Now, you can check if you're suctioning your tongue correctly by pinching your nose and try to breathe in whilst you're creating that suction. You're like, I can't. If you're creating suction and you're completely sealing that airway, you won't be able to breathe in through your mouth. That's a way you can check if you're sealing it correctly. Yeah, that's not an exercise in itself, it's just a check. Okay, and then the exercise to get the stretching part was, I'll create that suction. As I open the mouth wider, I'm stretching that side of the tongue more. And as I open wider and it stretches more, I've also got to increase the suction strength in relation to it so it doesn't pop off. That makes sense? Alan is still on the call. I thought that was
I found it very difficult to do.
Yeah, mate, if it's difficult, and I literally, I think one thing to bear in mind with all this, like my starting point on breathing was I'd had a traumatic brain injury I was trying to recover from, and my mechanics, my CO2 sensitivity were terrible, and my breathing as a result was poor. Structurally, if you look at my face, I've got a narrow face. My tongue overlaps all of my teeth because my teeth are all bent and crooked because I've got a very narrow face, which is a narrow palate, which means I haven't got enough room for all of my teeth. I haven't got room for my tongue. I'm quite structurally a bad breather. This type, which then means your tongue doesn't live in the roof of the mouth. And then someone shows you this exercise and a load of people in the comments go, oh, wow, yeah, look how good my breathing feels afterwards. And you're sat there going like, this feels rubbish, or this feels really hard, because you're like me, potentially, that it's hard at the start because maybe the tongue is very tight and maybe it's weak, and maybe there's not like that much space there because we just haven't been utilizing it well. The tongue is supposed to live in the roof of the mouth. With a bit of practice, and it's like, what do you have to do? Well, just a few times during the day when you remember, you just suction your tongue to the roof of the mouth and open your mouth a little bit. And maybe to start with, the mouth is only open a tiny bit. And then maybe in a few weeks, you'll send me a photo, Jacko, look what I can do now. It'll be like the weirdest photo you've ever sent someone. But it's like, you'll be able to see those improvements in time. And I can't reiterate enough, if it feels difficult, you're going to get the most out of it compared to people that found it easy. So don't be discouraged. Yeah?
Thanks.
Cool, no worries. Is there anything you do to help with neck alignment or make it easier? Like there's starting with the position on the floor for the neck alignment allows you to just be supported by the floor. And I think that the two the two cues, like top of the head towards the ceiling. So try and go, get that as high as you can, and then the palate on top of your throat, and like just having your hand there, just to sort of like feel like you're putting your palate on top of your throat. Whether you can actually put your palate on top of your throat or not, I don't know whether you can. But just the intention to try and do that helps to create that stacking, which helps create that open airway. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, that is. Thanks.
And then it's like just being aware of it, like in different positions. And again, like a progressive and systematic approach should be like doing it lying on the floor where you're supported is going to be easier. And then, doing it up against the wall, like I showed you, again, is a bit harder, but you've still got that feedback. But then doing it in free space, and then maybe what about if I did it in like, if I was in like a plank or something. Look, if I was in a plank, I've got to work on my alignment of everything whilst creating tension and think about in my head position while I'm creating tension. That's quite difficult. I could start with a position where I'm like kneeling and on my hands or on here. So if I was in this position, that's nowhere near as hard as a plank, but I am having to create some level of tension. And I could lift an arm off. Or, I just have to think about where do I want to try. This is where, if I'm working with sports people, you go, where do you need to be able to breathe well? I mean, all of us, it's like beneficial to be able to breathe well in any type of position that you're going to be challenged in. But if you do a particular sport or a particular exercise or activity, what does that require you to do? Does it require you to be upright, or are you a cyclist and you're like this? Or, what type of body positions do you need to be able to create that good alignment in?
Great, thanks. Actually, out of interest, when you like with boxers and martial artists, when they kick or punch, they tend to breathe out. Are you now sort of trying to advise them to almost breathe out with their mouth, or do you try and sort of adjust that to be more optimal?
Yeah, really good question. I work with a few. I've had the pleasure, because I love working with them. They're amazing guys. Fighters, mixed martial artists, UFC fighters, and there's a certain part of martial arts where they've been doing it for thousands of years. Huberman might not have a research paper on it yet, but that doesn't mean that it isn't valid. And potentially the thousands of years that they've been doing it for is a reason to really validate it, and that they keep doing it. So there's certain things that we have to, I believe, respect when something has stood the test of time, respect it, and also trying to, where are the wins for me as a coach that's going to work on a fighter's breathing? Where are the wins? Constantly arguing with him and his coach about whether he should or shouldn't do a when he punches or not is less important to me than a whole load of other things that I need to teach him. So because of my respect of martial arts and the history that it has, I don't want to have that discussion / argument when technically, from what I'm taught with the oxygen advantage, then there could be reasons why we wouldn't do an exhale, but there's also reasons why strong exhaling increases flexion tone for the body, which there's reasons why you'd want to do that when you're punching somebody. One, to help with the flexion tone for your hip, but two, when you're most likely to get knocked out is when you throw a punch and they throw, and you get countered at that time. And if you've created some tension, you're less likely to. So there's reasons why they actually probably would, and I'm not convinced that if I was to say from a CO2 perspective, you don't want to do a strong exhale, but I don't know that that's a good enough reason to not do it. If that makes sense.
Yes, no, it does. Thanks. That's right.
But yeah, it's a classic one that sort of comes up quite quickly when we delve into all the sort of breathing stuff. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a really good question you ask. You sort of go, yeah, we probably shouldn't be. Should we be really breathing out like that every time that we punch? Like, what's that doing for my CO2 levels and this, that, and the other? Which is all valid things. But I think that there's potentially a much wider picture that we need to consider it within for that particular sport. Cool.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Are there any major negatives to the mouth breathing you do in a sport like swimming or free diving with a snorkel?
Great question. Callum. Were you? I like your. It looks like you're like hosting a podcast or something with like your background.
No, I just didn't want any voices to come through my speaker.
No, this is good. So, um, nose breathing versus mouth breathing. Like we've done everything through the nose there, but when there's a certain level of intensity of exercise where you need to breathe through the mouth, and my belief and where I've got to it currently is that like I get frustrated now when the conversation is like nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And we looked at this study that said, and you're like, that's not the only thing. Like, how are we not considering the mechanics of breathing? So how about nose breathing but with really crap mechanics? How does that compare to mouth breathing with really good mechanics and better control of my breathing rate? Maybe better control of my CO2 levels. Like, who's got a study for that? Well, we haven't got a study for that because actually a lot of this, no, I'll go on a rant about studies, but there's a lot of stuff that's now scientific that isn't at all. It's flipping, just because it's in a paper, sometimes you wonder how these things get into being published, but we're missing the point a lot of the time. And sorry, I haven't answered your question yet, but you can see you just get passionate about certain things. Anyway, so it's not just mouth versus nasal breathing is one answer. The other thing with swimming, good luck breathing through your nose. You'll probably die. So yeah, breathe through your mouth. But in swimming, say if it's front crawl, when I turn and breathe in, I've got a very short period of time to get that air in. Okay? And when I've got a short period of time, it's harder for it to go down lower because that takes longer because of distance. So it's more likely to come up into here. I have done some training with an Olympic swimmer where she also, and I taught her the Oxyvantage actually, she did the certification with me. With talking about breathing in swimming, she was a distance swimmer, but she made a good point of like, you don't actually need, and when you've done the OA certification, you realise like this understanding, like you don't actually need that much air when you're swimming, like because you're going to breathe each time, every however many strokes you're going to do. So it's not like you need to take this massive breath in, but just being aware it's going to have to come through the mouth. But can you be aware of like your alignment? Because your alignment of the rib cage and pelvis will affect your streamline position. That's one thing. And as you turn and take that air in, can you make it a little bit more diaphragmatic than just upper chest? That would be my my sort of advice with swimming.
Right, thanks for the information. Yeah, it's interesting to know because I always see most of this stuff has to do with nose breathing. So I've always wondered, how does that translate to a sport like swimming or snorkeling? Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for the webinar. It was really interesting stuff.
Okay, thanks for joining. Yeah, if you think that when everything that we did in terms of the mechanics low down, where we're doing it on the floor below the collarbone, yes, I was asking you to do it in and out through your nose, but there was so much stuff that we were doing. It's definitely not just about nose, and it's one of the. Everyone wants everything to be. It is easy. Nothing we did was difficult, but everyone almost wants it to be like black and white. It's one thing, like okay, I'm just going to shut my mouth, and that's going to solve all of my breathing problems during my exercise or whatever. And it's like, no, like it's more than just that. The nose plays a huge role, but it's not just the nose. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of people, depending on the sports that I work with, a lot of like high intensity sports like rugby, fighting and that, like they're going to have to use their mouth. And what's important is that I teach them how to use their mouth with good breathing mechanics all going on down here. Those things are all in play, but appreciating that when you go to the mouth, you're much more likely to go to poor breathing patterns. It's actually where it becomes really important to understand breathing mechanics. And your CO2 tolerance is going to be one of a key thing that's going to manage at that tipping point when you start to lose control of your breathing. So it all sort of meshes in together, and it's far more than just.
It makes sense because when I used to do squad swimming, we did a lot of breath hold training.
Yeah.
And I think that improved our breathing when
sure.
we did sprint races. So yeah, makes sense with the CO2 tolerance.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, swimming has done breath holding for a long time. Jane, thanks for bringing the nuance. Really helpful. Appreciate it. Right, thank you, everybody. I'd stay here chatting all day, but I've got to go and make a barbecue. So yeah, I will send the replay and a reminder of the offer for the discount and a couple of certifications coming up. And if you have any questions, you can reply to me on that email or send me a message on Insta or whatever you like, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for joining. Thanks for having me. Thanks for breathing. Take care.